welcome or welcome back to BookTube with Amy. So today we are going to be doing the Scottish patter tag, and this tag was originated by Sarah over at CD Reads Again, and I am just so buzzing for it. This is just a brilliant tag, and it revolves around Scottish phrases and sayings, and then we're finding books that correlate to that. And I'm going to do it a wee bit differently for how I would usually do my tags, where I would have the title card of the question coming up, because Sarah says in her video that I would be here to help people with their pronunciation, although I think she did a damn good job herself, in fairness. So I'm going to say the prompt and then I'll tell you the book, as opposed to it having coming up on a card like usual, so you can get the pronunciation right if you are tagged. I have also set myself a wee bit of a challenge, and that every answer to the question in this tag is also by a Scottish author. We know I'm forever hyping up Scottish authors on this channel. I think that they are massively underrated, and any excuse to like push them out there and make you want to read them, I'm going to find it. So that's what I'm doing. But also just want to say a massive thank you to Sarah, and a massive thank you to all the authors that I am going to mention in today's video. You know, as a Scottish person living in Scotland, when I was growing up, especially in school, I was always told that the words that I used, you know, weren't proper, and the way that I spoke wasn't proper, and it's always something that I have been quite insecure about, and I'm still insecure about to an extent as an adult, because, you know, I do have a strong accent, and you know, we do use words that are specifically uniquely Scottish, and I think that for a while, unless you know you were Robbie Burns, they were trying to push that out and standardise the language that we used in school and make it, you know, the Queen's English. And I feel like there's been a big pushback on that, and it's not something that we are quick to erase anymore, and that we see it as an important part of our identity. And so, like, well done to Sarah for putting this tag together and really celebrating some great Scottish phrases, and to all the authors who I'm going to mention as well, because a lot of these authors use this dialect and these phrases or phrasing within their books, and it just means a lot to me as somebody who has always been quite self-conscious of their broad accent and their mannerisms and phrases, to see that in print. And some of these books in my eyes are amazing works of literature, and so to see my dialect and my feelings and phrasing represented in these books just means so much, and I'm sure it does to many other people. So that's just my wee bit before we get started. Alright pal, so this is a term of greeting or endearment. So first up, we're going to tag some people that I would like to do this tag. So I'm going to tag Ashley from Ashley's Media Addiction, who is a fellow Scottish booktuber, so I think it would be cool to see her take on this tag, and she's sort of in Edinburgh, so a wee bit different for me. She might have some different pronunciations of these phrases. And then I'm going to tag Jem from Bookish Gems, and I'm also going to tag Lisa from Lisa Does Life, because they also have quite strong accents, and I think it could be funny to hear them try to be Scottish, so I'm just being a bit cruel. Did you I? So this is a wee bit sarcastic, and it's when you didn't quite believe somebody, they'll maybe say something and you're like, did you I? Very good. Like, you just didn't really believe what they're telling you. And so this is a biography or a memoir that would be no believed if it was to be a work of fiction. Now this was a difficult one for me, because I didn't really read a lot of biographies or memoirs, let alone Scottish ones, so there's only sort of one book that I feel like I can talk about, and that is Euphoric Recall by Aiden Martin. So as much as I didn't enjoy the writing style in this book, I think that Aiden has still had one hell of a life, and basically anything bad that could have ever happened to him happened to him, and that's obviously a wee shame. And so as much as I didn't enjoy the way that this book was written, and I found it to be quite irksome, I think that the story behind it was still really well done, and obviously Aiden has had some struggles, and it was interesting to read about those struggles nonetheless. So this is the one that I would recommend. Away and bile your head. So this is basically when you're angry and you're telling somebody to get to, you know, bugger off, I'm not in the mood for you, you'd say away and bile your head. And so this is a book that made you angry. And for me, it's going to be Shoggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. So I buddy read this with Ange from Angie's Book Chatter, of course, because nobody on the world of BookTube can read Shoggy Bane without buddy reading it with Ange. It is an unwritten rule. And I also read it with Emily from Novel Novels. Now, I thoroughly adored this book. I devoured it. It made me raging though. Specifically the plot point with Eugene and just not really understanding Agnes's addictions, and not really having a grasp on how addiction actually works infuriated me. I feel like he really emotionally manipulated her into doing things that he didn't really understand the consequences of, because he didn't have an understanding of addiction, and that just fucked me off so much. And I was raging when I was reading this, so raging, and I could sort of see it coming. And then when it finally happened, oh my god, I was biling, let me tell you. I was so angry, and I would have had more than away and bile your head to have said to Eugene. Let me tell you, there were a few choice words that I would have used that were a wee bit stronger than away and bile your head, so he's lucky he's getting off with that. Have nae a Scooby. So this is when you're confused, you have nae a clue what's going on, you'd say, I have nae a Scooby, I've nae got a Scooby. That's how I would say, I'd say I've nae got a Scooby, but that's because I'm East Scotland. So this is a book that either you couldn't follow or you don't understand the popularity of. So I'm going to have to go with Ian Rankin. Now, I know that he is beloved and he gets a lot of hype, and I just don't get it myself. Now, admittedly, this isn't exactly my go-to genre. I see the word detective or police and I'm like, oh, absolutely not, no for me. I'm not a fan of a police procedural. However, it's set in Scotland. Like, I'm fairly sure they're set in Edinburgh, and it's sort of darker and grittier than your average police procedural. So that makes me feel like I should like it. But I just can't get on board with it. I don't know why. I know, however, that Simon loves these books. We have like a shelf and a half filled with Ian Rankin, so I know he is a big fan, but I just don't get the hype personally. So, belter. This is a description word. When you are in admiration of something, you would say like, oh, she's a belter. Or if something is really good and you're using it to describe something that isn't a person, you might say, oh, that's belting, or that's a belter. So it's just when something is really good. And so for this prompt, we've got to pick a character that is a belter, a beloved character. And for me, it's got to be Eleanor from Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I read this book a good couple of years ago now, and Eleanor is still somebody who lives in my brain rent-free. She is one of the most memorable characters that I have read about, and after I finished this book, like, I could not stop thinking about her, and I just wished that there were more books with Eleanor in it, because I missed my pal. And that's how Gail Honeyman's writing made me feel. She really did make me feel like me and Eleanor were pals. I'd gotten to know her so well. We went through this big journey together through Eleanor's life. So then, like, after the book was finished, I was a bit like, what now? Like, I need more. Like, I need Eleanor in my life. It was just absolutely amazing, and she is the funniest character ever. I loved her through our highs, through our lows, and through every point in this book. I just thought that she was brilliant and a really amazingly written, strong female character. I've said before on this channel, but I'm fairly sure that if people were to read this book, they would see Eleanor as a victim, and I don't. I see Eleanor as a really strong Scottish woman who just gets up, powers through, and does what she needs to do to get through. And she recognises that she doesn't always deal with things in the healthiest of ways, and deals with that as well. I think that she is anything but a victim. It was such a great book, and one that I will always recommend on this channel, and such great mental health representation as well. ball bag, a scrotum-based insult, but also sometimes a term of endearment. Here's where I lie, right? I think that if you call somebody a ball bag, that's an insult, right? But see, if you shorten it and you just call them a ball, that's when it's used as a term of endearment. So like if I'm like, what a fucking ball, then like, that's like, oh aye, like funny guy type thing. But if I go, what a fucking ball bag, different tone into it. So that's where I lie on that. So this is a character that you hate or a character that you despise as a bit of a ball bag. For me, I'm going to have to say Begbie for Trainspotting by Irvin Welsh. I think by far he is the least lovable character in this group of boys. I think that he is probably the one who is in the best position to make the better choices, and he time and time again just does not. I feel like he can be quite manipulative and controlling over some of the other boys in this group, and ultimately I just think that he is a bad guy, whereas some of the other boys in this book have just made bad choices that don't inherently mean that they are a bad person. So I think that Begbie is a ball bag. Chuktar, and so this is a description of somebody who comes for the Highlands. However, right, I'm for East Scotland. I'm for a place called West Lothian, which is bang in the middle of Glasgow and Edinburgh. So I have a bit of an East Scotland accent. And when I came through here to Glasgow to live with Simon and I got a job through here, they called me a Chuktar because my accent was just slightly different. And they still call me a Chuktar. And they still slag me off about my Chuktar accent and my Chuktar words. It's a great laugh for them, it really is. So Chuktar doesn't always mean just somebody for the Highlands. I think it's sometimes just used, especially in Glasgow, if you have an accent that isn't a Glasgow accent. And so this was to pick a book that was off the beaten tracks. And so I have picked Maggie's Grave by David Sodergrim. This is based in the Highlands in a wee town called Auchinmullen. And it is based in the Highlands, Chuktar Highlands. It felt thematically appropriate, but this is a phenomenal book. I think that it really has that isolating, I'm in the middle of nowhere and shit has gone down horror feel, which is just brilliant. I couldn't recommend it enough. I think this book is amazing. It was the first David Sodergrim that I read, and I really enjoy the fact that horror sometimes can be so Americanised that David Sodergrim just comes in with a fresh Scottish take, and it's really brilliant to see characters react to situations as to how I would react as a Scottish person. You know, there's no like big long screams while I'm clutching my face. It's like, you fucking bastard! Ken, it's great. I love that. We love to see it. So Maggie's Grave by David Sodergrim. Please check him out. This book is just phenomenal. I could not recommend it enough. So get it watched. His new book, The Har, is also out on the 20th of May. Get it pre-ordered, get it purchased, it's immense. Pure Baltic. So I wouldn't say pure Baltic, I'd say pure Baltic man. I don't know why, but it's an East Scotland thing, we just fire man onto the end of words all the time. I'd be like, oh, pure Baltic man. So that means it's freezing, it's really cold, and so we had to pick a book that was set in a cold setting. But with this one, it was optional because you could also swap it out with Dreich, which means it's raining, it's absolutely chucking it down, and I'm going to go with Dreich. And so the book that I'm going to talk about is Shopfront by Samuel Best. This is absolutely amazing. It's set in a wee town called Linlithgow, and I have had many a Dreich walks around Linlithgow Loch, and so that is why I have picked this one. But this is brilliant. This deals with your main character Ben, and he is finished with uni and he's struggling to get a wee job and, you know, work out what he wants to do with himself now that he's finished uni and he's got his degree. And I think that that is a position that a lot of people in Scotland have been in, because I feel like you're promised a job if you go and you do your degree, and then you do your degree and the job transpires, and you often have to try and work out what it is that you're going to do. And so he moves back to his hometown with his mum and his dad, and he just gets a wee job in a shop to try and get by while he's figuring out what he wants to do. And this really runs on similar themes to The Young Team by Graham Armstrong. You know, it's about a teenage boy, you know, a young adult still, figuring out what they want to do with their life in small town Scotland, and I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was absolutely amazing. Me and Simon have both read this and we both really enjoyed it. It's amazing, and it just hits so many points as to what it's like to grow up in small town Scotland. And this was set, you know, a couple of towns over from me where I grew up, and I found it to be really relatable, and it caused me to do some real reflections on what it was like for me to grow up as well. I thought it was phenomenal, so if you did enjoy The Young Teen, you will absolutely 100% enjoy Shopfront by Samuel Best. This is a wee bit like an underrated one. It's a wee bit of an underdog that I plan to hype up some more on my channel, so I'm sure it'll not be the last time you'll hear me talk about it. It's absolutely amazing. Give it a read. Taps off. So taps off weather in Scotland is when it's just a couple of degrees warmer than usual, to be honest, and there might still be frost on the ground, there might still be a wee bit of snow kicking about, but it's warm enough to have your tap off, because we can't deal with the heat. So like anytime it's a wee bit warmer, we're melting and we need to strip off. So that's what taps off is. So this is either a book that is a perfect summer read or your most inappropriate beach read. Now I am your perfect summer read kind of gal, so we know that I've went for your most inappropriate beach read, and I'm going for The Cutting Room by Louise Welsh. So this is such a dark and twisted book. It is phenomenal, and Louise Welsh has just released like a follow-up to this book, which I cannot wait to read. I will be waiting until it is released in paperback though, so I can get it to match my edition. But it's a great book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is dark, it is twisty, it is grotesque at points, but it is fun, and I feel like you would definitely get some funny looks if you were to be reading this on the beach with the other holiday makers. But it is absolutely fantastic and just a pinnacle of gritty, gripping Scottish fiction. Greeting. So that in Scotland means crying, but it could also mean crying with laughter, so you need to listen to the context, because I'll often say, oh, I'm greeting, but what I mean is I'm greeting with laughter. This is, would you rather never be able to reread your favourite books again, or never be able to read a new book again, and what would have you greeting more? Now, despite the thousands of books I have hauled on this channel at this point, I actually think that it would make me greet more if I couldn't reread a favourite. I really enjoy a reread, and there's something just comforting and calming about a reread for me, and I'm definitely one of the type of people that when things get a bit mental in life and it gets a bit hectic, and you know, my brain isn't always being my best pal and my mental health's playing up a wee bit, that I will gravitate towards a reread. And I have read some pretty amazing books on my time, so I feel like if I could never reread one of them again, I'd be quite upset about it. If I only had to read the books that I have read up until my life so far, I think I'd be okay with that. I've got quite a variety under my belt. I feel like I could mood read my rereads, and I'd be fine with that. So it would be rereading for me. Controversial opinion. And the big pile of books that I have hauled at the weekend, they're just in the corner looking at me like, really bitch? But I'd pick a reread. Gone yourself. So this is a term of encouragement to, you know, cheer somebody on. This is a book that has lived up to the hype. For me, it's going to be Death of a Ladies' Man by Alan Bissett. So when I say hype, I mean there was a wee bit of hype about this book, don't get me wrong. But like, for me, this came out when I was still in high school, and so me and the one other lassie in my year who liked books were pals, and we were both quite hyped about this, and like that at the time was 100% in my circle of pals, so quite the hype. But I feel like this did really live up to the hype. This came out round about the time, I think, that Alan Bissett was just finishing up with the Moira monologues, and he did a couple of tours at the Fringe and stuff, and he did some writing classes round about the time of this being released. And so I feel like there was quite a bit of hype around this, and I felt like it lived up to it for me. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. We have our main character Charlie Bain, and he is navigating a divorce and trying to find out who he is on the back of that relationship failing. He moves back in with his mum. He's an English teacher, and he just doesn't really know what to do or where to go and where his life is taking him. And it just basically documents his process of trying to figure all of that out. Now this is a really interesting book because I've read this twice in my life, and twice I've had a completely different experience. So when I read this as a young teenage girl, I thought that Charlie Bain was like God's gift to women. Like, thought he was brilliant, thought he was funny, revered him like some sort of a god. And then as an adult who reread this, I actually felt really sorry for him, and I pitied him, and I realised it was quite pathetic. So it's interesting how your opinions on a character changes, and you know, the book hasn't changed, but I have as a reader, and so this book is the book that I always associate with that, like having such a flip-flop on the opinion of the main character based on where I was at in my life. But it's just a brilliantly written book. It's really honest, and you know, Charlie Bain as a main character is no always a main character you root for. You don't always agree with his choices, and he's a bit of an arse at times, and that's fine because he's still completely lovable. This is a great book, and I would recommend more people to pick it up and check it out. Get loudy. So this is a description of behaviour when somebody is getting carried away. So like if you're going out at the weekend, you might say, oh, I'm going to get loudy. Or like if you're seeing somebody who's like dancing like there is nobody watching, you might say, oh, she's getting it loudy. But aye, this is a book that you think more people should shout and rave about. And I'm going to do a bit of a corporate answer, and I'm going to say every single book that I have mentioned and all the authors that I have mentioned also. They're all great books. I loved every single one of the books that I have spoken about, other than the Ian Rankins, but that's because they are in my genre. Simon, who does read a lot of crime fiction, thoroughly enjoys them, so I would even recommend them. But they are all brilliant Scottish authors, and I would recommend that you pick up their books. Even if these books aren't necessarily in the genre of book that you would normally pick up, I think that they are all really quite accessible. And all very character focused as well. So if you're a character driven reader and genre is a wee bit less important to you, as long as the characters are great, then I would recommend every single book that I have spoken about. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying everything that you are reading at the moment. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!